It's time for season number 2 in our SMU dynasty, and we have an extremely tough month to kick off this season, including playing in the Old Spice Classic tournament. Both 4-star freshmen Cameron Champ and Nathan Malloy would be starting for us this season, as well as our top player Tommy Walls returning back for his junior year. It was never too early though to start thinking about recruiting for next season, and we would be targeting 4-star shooting guard Devin Norton, as well as 4-star center Baldwin Goodwin. But at the front of our mind was this first game against Miami, as we'd see how we'd fare as we open up season number 2 on the road. Miami would get things started as their senior point guard Doug Shannon would find their first bucket of the night, with SMU trying to get some motion offense going against this zone early on, and it would be their senior Emmanuel McGee with the first bucket. Junior Avery Hodge from the corner, that would be no good, but McGee right again cleaning up the glass, and one for the senior center as he would give SMU the lead. But Miami would strike right back as Jamal Robertson from deep for the Mustangs, giving them their first three-pointer of the night as we were under 3 minutes to go in the first half. The Hurricanes responding, both teams heating up from 3 as it would be the freshman Devin Reese coming right back with another one. But the Mustangs down by 1 with under 5 seconds to go. It would be Doug Shannon in the lane for the Hurricanes, capping off a 13-point performance from the senior point guard, and he would help lead the Hurricanes into halftime with a 26-23 lead. And the one freshman we haven't heard from today at all has been Nathan Malloy, who went 0 for 3 for SMU in the first half from the field. In fact, Coach Husky had Jamal Robertson starting the second half in the shooting guard position instead, and that seemed to pay off right away as he would knock down an opening 3 here for the Mustangs. And then it was Emmanuel McGee giving them their first lead of the second half tonight, but it didn't look like the Hurricanes had cooled down from beyond the three-point line after halftime. Both teams trading leads at this point as it would be another 3 for Miami, courtesy of the sophomore shooting guard Andrew Newsome, as Miami now would go right back to him again for another 3. And I don't know why we kept leaving the Hurricanes offense wide open as good as they were shooting tonight in the second half, with Doug Shannon drilling another one for the Hurricanes, putting them up by 5 as they would go down to the low post to find an easy bucket, or what should have been an easy bucket as that would be called goaltending. 2 points for the Hurricanes as Tommy Walls' step back 3 would fall. We were only down by 4 with 30 seconds to go, and it would be Sam Poe from beyond the arc, his first bucket of the night, but now we needed to foul, sending Doug Shannon to the line for 1-1 for the Hurricanes. He would knock down the first one, but would miss the second free throw as we'd call a timeout, giving us 1.9 seconds to try to win this game as Sam Poe would throw it up, but it would be in and out, no good, and we would end up dropping our season opener on the road by a single bucket to the Hurricanes. Taking a look at our 2 freshmen, Cameron Chapman only had 4 points but 5 rebounds for us, and Nathan Malloy did manage to find 2 buckets from beyond the arc in the second half. Thankfully, we would bounce right back from that loss though with a 7-point victory over Georgia Tech, and we were climbing up the list for both of our 4-star recruits we were targeting. We'd see if the following week hurt our chances at landing them at all, because we would drop back-to-back games against Arkansas and Vanderbilt. So it was pretty important that we won this game at home coming up against number 6 Alabama. Thankfully, we would have home court advantage helping us today as Avery Hodge would get things started for us. But Alabama would waste no time responding as their senior point guard Peter Mobley would drive the lane and respond right back. For being ranked number 6 in the country, this was an extremely young Crimson Tide team that we were facing, as other than their senior point guard Peter Mobley, this Crimson Tide team was comprised entirely of sophomores and freshmen in the starting 5. Speaking of freshmen, Bama center Terrell Starks was off to a strong start for them in this game, but Jamal Robertson would give us the lead right back with a 3 as now Bama, they would go to their sophomore small forward who could shoot, Lance Plummer, as he would knock down that shot as well as one more right before the end of the half. And it looked like maybe Tommy Walls got this shot off in time for us, but the ref said he did not, so we would head into halftime only down by 6, 31-25 against the Crimson Tide here at home. The second half was not off to a great start for us though, as Tommy Walls would turn the ball over to Leon Harper, putting the Tide up by double digits early on here in the second half. But we would go to our our true freshman Nathan Malloy to hit a 3, and then Tommy Walls would follow that up, getting this game back down to only 1 point for us, but then Bama started heating up. Justin Crockett would hit not one, but go for 2 threes in a row against us, and we just could not slow down Bama's sophomore shooting guard as he would make it an 11-point lead for them. The lead for number 6 Alabama would continue to grow as they would go up by 15 over us, and at that point there was nothing much we could do as the Crimson Tide would run away with this one, and we would drop yet another game here in the first month of the season. Thankfully, that didn't seem to change our recruit's mind as Devin Norton would sign to come play for us next season, and we were still number 1 on Baldwin Goodwin's list as well. That brought us to the Old Spice Classic preseason tournament where we turned things around and picked up a first-round victory over Cornell, and then another double-digit win over the Florida State Seminoles, sending us to the tournament championship where we would be taking on UCLA. The Bruins were a solid team that matched up with us pretty evenly on paper, so it looked like this stretch of a tough schedule would continue for us in this championship game. Surprisingly though, both teams got out to a very slow start in this game shooting-wise, as we would have just barely over 50 points combined between both teams. Freshman Jared Lockhart would try to get one last shot off here before halftime, but it would not fall for the Mustangs, as we'd head to the second half with a 4-point lead and both teams shooting under 40% in the first. We were not only looking to hold on to our lead, but improve on that shooting percentage here in the second, with both Tommy Walls and Jamal Robertson looking to change that from beyond the arc. Our shooting did seem to improve here in the second half as we would go up by double digits over the Bruins, and this great fadeaway jumper from Khalid Stone in the post would put us up by 18, creating a deficit that was just too much for this Bruins team to come back from here in the final few minutes of this game, as we would walk away as champions in the Old Spice Classic preseason tournament, thanks in part to a perfect 100% shooting day from James Buchanan off the bench for us. Despite winning the Old Spice Classic, Baldwin Goodwin still had not signed to come play for us next season, but we were able to schedule a visit with him now and would bring him in for our game against Fordham. Before that game next month though, we had one last game this month on the road in Madison taking on the Badgers. The Badgers would get things started for us here in the matchup as they would go to their senior Kibu Kirby for the first bucket, but we were quite the opposite as it took almost a minute and a half for us to find our first points of the night. Down by 4 early on, our offense wasn't playing too well here to start off this game, as Tommy Walls wasn't even able to hit both of his free throws. Things just kept getting worse for us as our bench unit would come in, and this would turn into an ugly turnover where Bobby Coffey would turn it into easy 2 for the Badgers. And after almost 6 minutes, we had still scored only 1 bucket in the entire first half against them. We'd got it a little closer before halftime, but John Rivers would knock down this 3-pointer as the buzzer would go off, and it was not looking good for us headed into the second half as we were down 11 to Wisconsin. We needed to get some points, and we needed to get them early as Cameron Chapman would find his way to the free throw line, and this time we would finally go 2 for 2 at the charity stripe, where that finally seemed to spark a flame here in the offense as Nathan Malloy would knock down a corner 3, and what was once an 11-point lead had been cut down to a 6-point lead for the Badgers after this 3 from John Rivers. Time was running out for us though as we only had 30 seconds left in the game, but it was still possible as the freshman Nathan Malloy would knock down this huge 3-pointer for us, getting it down to only a 2-point lead, but it would not be enough as Wisconsin would run out the clock here, and we would end the month of November with yet another loss on the road. And it definitely didn't help that we only shot 33% from the field the entire first half tonight. The struggles continued as we would drop our next game to Wichita State on the road, but thankfully would get back in the win column against St. John's and would make it 2 in a row with our second straight home game against BYU. That would finally bring us to our big matchup against Fordham, and while they weren't a big opponent, it was a big matchup for us because we had Baldwin Goodwin in attendance. If we wanted any chance at signing the 4-star center this season, we needed to make a good impression while he was on his visit for this game, and early on so far, that was not the case. Down 4-0 to Fordham early on, we would go to Emmanuel McGee and the big man would get our first bucket of the night, but the deficit here in the first half was slowly starting to get bigger, and I was worried this might start turning into our game against Wisconsin. We had managed to reel it back to only a 3-point deficit, but the Rams were not slowing down at all, but thankfully our bench unit was giving us some great support from beyond the arc tonight. James James Buchanan was on pace to score double digits for us coming off the bench, as his hot hand from beyond the arc seemed to rub off on the starting unit as well, with Tommy Walls knocking down this three-pointer for us right before the buzzer, sending us into halftime only down by 2 against Fordham. If we were able to almost come back from a double-digit deficit against the Badgers last game, a 2-point deficit against Fordham should be no problem. With a great pass here from the freshman Nathan Malloy, Tommy Walls would give us our first lead of the game, and that shot really seemed to give the offense a spark for us here in the second half going forward. Despite being down by 8, Fordham was not slowing down at all, as they were still keeping it close, as the sophomore Ty Griffith here with under 5 seconds to go would knock down a three-pointer for them, and they decided 2 seconds was still enough time for them to try to complete a comeback, but Sam Poe would bury his free throws at the charity stripe, helping us secure this very important victory against Fordham 56-49, hopefully giving 4-star center Baldwin Goodwin a great impression for our program. It definitely seemed to do that, as we jumped to his top spot but only had 17 points remaining for recruiting the rest of the season. With only 17 points, it was crucial that we kept winning and not losing games like we did against Texas Tech, but at least had a chance to turn things around here at the start of conference play, as we were currently sitting at 9th place in our conference standings. Memphis was a perfect 13-0 to start the early season, so this definitely was going to be a tough test for us to start conference play here in Season 2. The Tigers' starting lineup was comprised of 3 underclassmen who were poised to be some of the best in the conference, and they were showing why early on, as they would jump out to an 11-point lead. Halfway through the first half, we hadn't even gotten to double-digit points yet, and were down by as much as 17 until Jamal Robertson would hit this three-pointer for us. The starting unit would come back in with less than a minute to go in the first half, and hopefully this defensive play from Tommy Walls translating to a 3 would change the tide for us, as we were cutting into the lead, but it was still a double-digit deficit headed into the second half, where we needed to slow down this Memphis Tigers offense. Shooting 40% from the field was a lot better than we had done in previous games this season, but there was no way we could pull off this comeback if we continued to let Memphis shoot at 63%. Somehow though, we had pulled within only 2 points, and then the freshman Nathan Malloy would give us our first lead. The Tigers, now down by 1, would go to the senior Keith Nichols, who would try to take the lead back from them, but that shot would be off the mark, and with not enough fouls to get us to the line, we would be able to run out the clock to complete the comeback here against Memphis, and just barely, we would get off on the right foot here to start conference play in season number 2, thanks to a huge second half effort from Tommy Walls and Nathan Malloy from beyond the arc. Despite winning our first game, we would drop the next game in conference play to the UAB Blazers 67-58, and although we were at the top of the list for Baldwin Goodwin, we were officially all out of recruiting points for the rest of the season. We were off to a pretty good start though in January, with that loss to UAB being the only one so far, and headed into this matchup against East Carolina, we were currently sitting at 2nd place in the conference. A win here on the road against the Pirates would get us a 6-1 finish in the first month of conference play, and if we could stay at 2nd place headed into the final month of the season, we had a real shot at contending for the conference championship. So far, this has proven to be a close game though, as Tommy Walls would give us the first lead of the day, and he would go right back at this East Carolina defense looking for 3 points again, just finding it a different way this time. Our lead over the Pirates was slowly growing here within the last couple of minutes of the first half, and with only 4 seconds left to go, freshman Nathan Malloy would just barely get the shot off in time, and the bucket would count as it rings around the basket, giving us a 10-point lead over the Pirates headed into the second half, with over half of those points coming from fast break opportunities. We needed the offense to stay fast and sharp here in the second half to hold our lead, and that seemed to be happening, as even though East Carolina was still finding some buckets, they couldn't get it down past a 10-point lead. They would finally get it down to 9 points, but with only 30 seconds left, they would have to send us to the line, and having been a great free throw shooting team this year, this was no different, as Sam Poe would knock down all of his free throws for us here at the end of the game, helping us end January with a 6-1 conference record with this win on the road against the Pirates. Despite the great start to conference play, we could definitely rule ourselves out of landing Baldwin Goodwin now, as we were all out of recruiting points and falling down his list. But on the bright side, headed into February, the wins kept rolling in for us in conference play, as we were tied for 2nd place with UTEP, only a game behind UAB. The first first place Blazers happened to be our very next conference opponent, led by their junior Kibu Blevins, but our response to his strong inside defensive game was our strong outside shooting ability. We got out to an early lead over UAB, and we weren't relenting with the three ball at all, but they were still keeping this a close game throughout, as Devin Vilma would take the lead right back for them. We soon found ourselves down by 7 with less than 15 seconds to go in the first half, but that three-pointer from Tommy Walls would cut the lead down to a much more manageable 4 points headed into the second. The three ball had worked great for us in the first half, so we didn't want to abandon what had been working here in the second, and right away Tommy Walls would come out and knock 2 of them down for us to take the lead right back. And with the way both of these teams' offenses were playing, it looked like this game was gonna come down to the wire. With under 4 minutes to go now, UAB had a 2-point lead, but we would take it right back with yet another 3, and that's where the lead would stand with just over a minute to go, as UAB would try to get this back within a 1-point game, and they would do just that, but we're still down by 1 point, so they would have to send us to the free throw line. But Sam Poe would miss his free throw, but Bryce Bragg was there to clean it up, saving us from a potential disaster situation, as Abdu Mayo's shot was off for the Blazers, and they'd have to foul again. And after knocking down all of our free throws this time, there was nothing else the Blazers could do here, as we would narrowly escape with a victory over the first place team in our conference by 7 points on the road. We would follow that up with an 8-point victory over the team we were previously tied for second place with, and at this point I was positive that we had no shot at landing Baldwin Goodwin anymore. With the only teams remaining on our conference schedule being some bottom dwellers, we would simulate the rest of conference play, and that single win against UAB was enough for us to clinch the regular season title, giving us the first overall seed and a first round bye in our conference tournament. Our junior point guard Tommy Walls led us with points per game this season, averaging almost 17 an outing, and not far behind him were our true freshmen Cameron Chapman averaging 13 a game, our freshman small forward James Lewis averaging 9 points a game, and our freshman shooting guard who started for us as well, Nathan Malloy, averaging just shy of 9 points as well. Our second round matchup in the tournament would be going up against the Rice Owls, and we would clear them no problem with an 82-53 victory. Next up was our semifinals matchup going up against the Thundering Herd of Marshall, and once again this was no match, as we would smoke them 82-58. It was time for the conference championship, and we would be taking on none other than the Memphis Tigers, a team that we just previously bested in the first month of conference play 58-57. Memphis would get this conference title game started with the first bucket of the night, but we would follow it right up with this fast break bucket from our freshman Cameron Chapman. The Tigers jumped out to a quick 6-point lead, but we would respond with our other freshman Nathan Malloy, getting it back down to only a 2-point game, but Keith Nichols would respond for Memphis. Nichols had the hot hand for the Tigers offense here in the first half with 12 points already, but it was not enough to keep us out of the game, as Bryce Bragg would drive the lane and give us our first lead of the night, as we had held Memphis scoreless for the past 2 minutes until this fast break bucket, which would give them the lead right back and would get one more in the paint here before halftime, as we would head into the second half in this Conference USA title game down by 3 to the Tigers 27-24. Both teams had traded buckets throughout the entire second half, and it was still only a 2-point lead for Memphis, but they were looking to extend it, and despite some sloppy play from us, we were still holding our own and not going anywhere. Once again, it was Bryce Bragg who had an opportunity to give us the lead, as he would draw the foul on this shot, going to the line for 2 free throws, as he was a 68% shooter on the year, knocking down the first one, but he would miss the second one, allowing Memphis to take the lead back for us, as their point guard Alex Lester from deep, he would knock down that 3-pointer, and that seemed to give a spark to this Tigers offense, as now up by 6, they couldn't seem to miss from anywhere on the court in these last 2 minutes, eventually getting their lead to a point where we could not complete the comeback, and Memphis would end up walking away with a victory here in the title game, potentially ending our postseason hopes, as they would celebrate on the court and we would leave defeated, dropping this one 54-62 against the Tigers. Despite the championship loss, we still had a chance to land an at-large bid for the tournament, and although it wasn't great, I would still take a potential 16 seed over missing the tournament entirely. It was time to find out if we would get a spot though, as it was Selection Sunday, and I think this was a little better than the projected 16 seed, as we would land the 10th seed in the Midwest region, as we would be taking on the 7th seeded Maryland Terrapins in the first round of the tournament. Thankfully, at this point in the season, we had got accustomed to playing very tough teams, as we had one of the toughest toughest non-conference schedules out of all the teams in our conference this season. It looked like that preparation earlier this year was paying off as we were holding our own against Maryland, and then for the first time in the game with just over 3 minutes to go, we would pick up our first lead. Our offense was clicking as we were on a 10-2 run here, and Nathan Malloy would extend it, and that would be followed up with one more three-pointer by Jamal Robertson with less than 30 seconds to go, giving us a 5-point lead over Maryland here in our first round game, 30-25, headed to the second half. It was great that we had a lead, but we could not get complacent and let the Terrapins back in this one. But right as I say that, that is unfortunately what we would do as they got it back down to a 2-point game, with their true freshman shooting guard Bob Poe giving them the lead from this corner three. Just over a minute to go now, and we found ourselves down by 2 as Sam Poe would take the lead right back, and it looked like this game was going to come down to the wire as Devin Nixon would tie it back up, but that left just enough time for us to try to get one last bucket as Sam Poe's shot would be off the mark and Maryland would get the rebound. And with only 4 seconds left, it would be the senior Mawuku McFadden driving the lane and drawing the foul for Maryland, with a chance to win it with some free throws with 1.5 seconds left. And after knocking down the first one, McFadden would hit the second one, and our season would come down to a last second heave here from half court as Sam Poe's shot was off the mark, and that would wrap up this first round game as our season once again would come to a close in the first round of the NCAA tournament here against Maryland, and they would be advancing on to the second round to take on number 2 Villanova. Texas would go on to end up winning the national championship, and it was officially time for season number 2's offseason. We would only end up signing one recruit, which was 4-star shooting guard Devin Norton, and we were going to have a young team next season as unfortunately we were losing senior Emmanuel McGee. Starting point guard Tommy Walls was foregoing his senior season to enter the NBA draft, and Khalid Stone would be transferring out for his senior season as well. Headed into off-season recruiting, we needed a center on the roster, and I wanted to try to bolster our point guard position, so we would be going after 4-star center Doug Ware, 4-star point guard Kim Perez, and another 3-star point guard Luke Morrison for some extra depth. We would end up signing the 4-star center Doug Ware and 3-star point guard Luke Morrison, but Kim Perez would end up deciding to sign with Kansas. Both Doug Ware and Devin Norton would be in the starting lineup for us as true freshmen headed into season number 3, and Luke Morrison would be coming off the bench as the 6th man leading our bench unit for us. We would also be seeing James Roberts for the first time, who we recruited in season 1 and took a redshirt last season. We were headed back to the Old Spice preseason classic to see if we could run it back as champions once again, and ESPN had us projected finishing in 2nd place behind none other than Memphis, just like this past season again. We had a couple more scholarships to work with and had 201 recruiting points, and thankfully our schedule was going to be a lot easier than this past season's. Poor shooting last season cost us many games, so I was spending 70% of our training time on shooting for the backcourt and 80% of the time in the post, both with offense and defensive training for our big men. And with such a young starting lineup, we were going to spend 70% of the training on our starters. Hopefully that's enough of a difference to help us finally make a push to win the Conference USA title here headed into season number 3.